Welcome to Focus on Why, the podcast where reflection sparks action. I'm Amy Rowlandson, and together we'll explore compelling stories, profound insights, and transformative experiences from inspiring guests worldwide. Feeling lost or unfulfilled? Searching for clarity, purpose, or meaning in your work and life? This podcast invites you on a journey of self-discovery to align your work with your values, shape your future with intention, and create a purposeful way of life. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why. Before we start, have you signed up to receive my weekly email newsletter, Friday Focus? Every Friday, I focus on one topic with one action arising. The link to sign up is in the show notes. Today on Focus on Why, I am joined not by one guest, but two. Welcome, John Lane and Will Barfield.
Hello.
Thank you, Amy.
And where are you both joining us from?
So we are both joining you from separate places, but we each live in Raleigh, North Carolina, here in the States.
Amazing. And how are you finding the weather right now?
We finally have spring. We should have that for about 3 days, and then we'll have scorching summer.
Yeah, brilliant. So this episode is an unusual one. I have two guests and two focuses on why, or maybe not. We will find out. But what is it you're focusing on right now?
So I'll go first, Will, if that's okay.
I love that. Yes, please.
So here's how I introduce myself when talking. Then I'm going on the professional side, not necessarily the personal life side, but I introduced myself as somebody who can help business leaders, owners, etc., get the people thing right. And by the people thing, I mean in almost every company, the most important and expensive and valuable asset are the people who work there. And yet in many companies, they don't get nearly the attention and the intentionality that they require to do their best work. And, and this is not some soft skill, nice to have. It's like, if people are motivated and properly aligned, they're going to produce better work, better outcomes, more money for the business. And so that's the work that I do. My why is that at 30 plus years in corporate America, I suffered through most of the lack of care, lack of attention, lack of alignment work, and had some pretty crappy bosses along the way. So I've learned a ton about how not to do it. And so in this probably last phase of my career, I'm trying to do what I can to help reverse that. It may be going against windmills, but it gives me motivation, and that's my why.
Amazing. Well, I will come back to that in a moment. Will, enlighten us on your focus right now, please.
Certainly. Thank you, Amy. Well said, John. I do want to note that John and I own separate businesses as consultants, and then we own a business together. So it's very unique that he had a career path and some consulting work that he was doing before we connected, and is still on that path. And I have a business that I own with my wife. It's a woman-owned company, the path that I remain on, but there's overlap between his passions and his why and mine. And when we found one another and we found that unified why, we actually decided to start a business together. And so we do work separately, but also in concert. And it's a very unique relationship. I've been in the recruiting industry now for over 20 years. And, I work here in the US as well as internationally, Canada, the UK, Europe, and most recently won a project in Australia, interestingly enough, helping 1 to 500 employee, typically, companies with hiring excellent talent. Barfield Revenue Consulting is the name of the business that I own with my wife. And we spend most of our time, 80 to 85% of our work, on helping our clients hire revenue driving people, sales, marketing, business development, which is why the practice is named that. But I spend about 15 to 20% of my time on special project work for clients. When you've been hunting human beings for 2 decades, you can step into an open search and help hire someone wonderful regardless of the discipline. Um, but very similar to John's why, right? Which is he wants to help companies take care of their greatest asset, which is their people. I want to help companies identify and hire that greatest asset, which is people. I had no idea I wanted to get into recruiting, Amy. Zero. When I entered the business in 2004, it was because I was dating my wife at the time, and she knew the owners of a staffing agency. And she said, I love you, but I hate your job. Why don't you talk to these folks and see if you might want to try a different industry? And I actually interviewed with them with the hope that I would be a candidate they could submit to other customers of theirs. But we just really hit it off, and they said, well, you come work for us, and doing sales and business development in the recruiting industry, and the rest is history. Now I've been in it since 04. I'll never leave it. I started a company with my wife to continue doing it, and this is our plan. So my why would be helping companies find wonderful people, and helping people who need a wonderful opportunity, find that job. There's no sales role anywhere else on the planet where there's a good explosion of positive energy from both sides, not just the buyer, which is the company, but also the product, which is the person. You sell a widget or you sell a service. The widget or the service isn't going to say, wow, you changed my life, because they're inanimate. But you help a human being find a wonderful opportunity, and you've changed their life, and they go around and tell other people about it. I'll stop here in a moment, but this is interesting. I had I sent a message to someone last week. I'm trying to help a gentleman who's in a career search find an opportunity. This person is working at a company that this guy would like to join. So I sent him a quick note and I said, hey, Chris, it's been a long time. This guy's in my network. He's trying to break into your company. Can you help him? Can you connect him internally? And Chris messaged me back. He said, absolutely. He said, I still tell people about how you changed my life in 2013 and helped me get the first job that I, ever got in software sales. And I'm still in it and I love it. And honestly, Amy, like I don't remember my direct work with Chris from 12 years ago, because I've helped thousands of people find jobs, but it's a nice message to hear. He's like, I still tell people about how you changed my life. That is the why.
And that, for both of you, is so clear that there is this connection in terms of a relationship, and it does sound like you've met this perfect partner in business for one another, in terms of, if you were dating, if this were a marriage, it would be soulmates in that respect, because you're just so well aligned. You've both mentioned the why, and the why being for John, that he suffered through, that there was this lack of care and attention, and he's trying to reverse that. I asked about the weather earlier, and the weather in terms of the business climate right now for you is, for the work that you're doing with compassion and getting the people thing right, I feel that must be pretty hard.
Yeah, it is hard. We're in a macro environment that is rough, that doesn't respect people, and we're at a point in technology where a couple of years ago, big companies would say, no, 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 automation, AI, whatever, that's going to help our people do their work. Now they're openly saying, no, we're human replacement. And so I fear we may be in a transition period where humans are less valued on the job, and companies are going to be empowered to treat them like the widgets Will mentioned, and you either fit or you don't. If you don't, you're gone. I don't know. I'm not a futurist, but my my work My work continues. And, I learned this in sales. I'm not in sales, although I guess in some way we all are. Um, to be successful, it's okay to not be okay for everyone, right? And so there are companies that don't value what I do, and that's okay. There are companies that do. And so my focus is on working with companies that are aligned with the way I think. And frankly, my message will fall dead flat to a business leader or owner who uh, doesn't think generally in the long way, and that's okay. I find my niche and I work that, and I'm happy to do it.
And this ability to align your best work in terms of knowing that you are creating something that has more of a legacy piece than an immediate return for the stakeholders. What's important to you about the shift from human replacement to people at the center of a business, people at the center of the planet and profit?
That's maybe bigger than I can answer on on the planet. But I'll just say this, and I mentioned it earlier. I don't find my I don't position my work to be moralistic or like societally beneficial at the expense of company success. I position my work as an accelerant to company success, right? Um, letting people go takes time and attention. It costs money. Hiring people like my friend Will is a very inexpensive endeavor. Getting people up to speed costs time and money. And so my whole pitch is around accelerating success, not necessarily saying do things that are good for people because you'll feel better or you'll leave some humanistic legacy. It is true, you can and you will, but it's also about dollars and cents, right? So teams that are aligned and engaged and happy and productive in that work will produce better outcomes for the company. So I'm not sure that answers your question, but that's that's how I think about it.
Will, did you have anything to add on that?
So you you asked John a couple of questions there. He addressed two different things. I do want to go back to your business weather question. And certainly we're dealing with some interesting, global headwinds at the moment, right? At the time of this recording, with tariffs and that kind of business that's coming out of the U.S. and our new president and the things that he is moving on from his agenda with great aggression. We already here in the U.S. were dealing with a slow and unstable professional white collar job market. And I said it that way on purpose because there are segments of our employment landscape here in the U.S. that are really strong in doing a lot of hiring, but they tend to be more of jobs you do with your hands and jobs that you do where you are caring for people, right? So swinging a hammer, turning a wrench, being a nurse, being a teacher. Jobs that there are not nearly enough people that want to do that to fulfill the need for it. And on the other side, you have companies that continue starting in 22 and continuing now here in the US that are laying off a lot of folks in that kind of late 20s to early 50s bracket in terms of age, middle management, high earning white collar, and there's not job replacement behind that, whether it's AI or hiring freezes or budget cuts or concerns about spending money. We've got an oversaturation, oversupply issue here in the US where there's more people looking than there is demand to hire them. And it's an interesting and challenging dynamic to navigate, particularly when we're still also dealing with high interest rates here and inflation. What is, are we going to have a soft landing on a recession or not? what's going on politically. So it is a challenging time to navigate, not just as a small business owner who deals with people and companies and employment like John and I, separately and together, but it's also hard for companies and individuals to navigate. No one knows what's going to happen. There's lack of confidence, consumer confidence, and business confidence. And when that is occurring, just people don't move. Just fear freezes. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here in the U.S. over the next several months. John and I are very close to it because we're talking to these companies and talking to these individuals, and we have to be, really near the heat. So, we can talk to it pretty accurately. And I completely lost track of what the second question was that you asking, because I wanted to answer that one.
Well, in terms of where you're going, there's always going to be challenges. We're always going to be navigating different circumstances. There's always going to be something that we're having to feel through, and purpose being the constant, having purpose and the people at the core. Yes, there are challenges with the way that AI and automation have fast-tracked some businesses. There was something I was thinking of the other day, which is, I don't know if you've ever read The Chimp Paradox, but it's Professor Steve Peters, who's the author, talks about how we have a troop size, a number of people before it then becomes unmanageable. And this is in our personal relationships. And I feel like it's the same for businesses in terms of there's sizes when you don't know the names of everyone in your business, it becomes a different challenge, a different thing. And you don't therefore necessarily count as an individual, you're a number. And this is when I think personnel got shifted to human resources, the actual, now you're talking about human replacement, it is this iteration. Where do you see business and getting the people thing right from both perspectives?
Thank you for reframing that. Here's what I'll say about it. Most of my clientele is small business, privately held small business, and I'm working with the founders or the executive leadership team. That's 75+% of my work. So in those settings, there's still quite a focus on culture and fit and the people and getting it right. They're not always living by the culture. No human's perfect, except my wife. They're not always putting people first, but they talk about it and they try, and it's still part of what they want to do. And they're paying John to do his work, or paying me to do my work, or paying us to do our work together because it matters to them to at least make an effort to get it right and maximize the talent that they have and add the right people to the business. And those don't tend to be companies that are talking to me about, we're going AI with this, or we're going automated with that. They're still trying to do it with really good humans. Interestingly, in my industry, for years there has been this, AI is going to replace recruiting, and here's how. Right? AI can do this, AI can do that, this agent and that agent, and what these bots. And there is something to be said for what AI can do in the recruiting industry with regard to searching and sourcing and even messaging. And I think that it serves a purpose most often in volume situations where you need to reach a lot of people, or a lot of the same kinds of people, or you're just doing high volume recruiting for large companies. I'm much, much more of a one search bounty hunter. And what I can tell you about my business is there is some gut instinct and some communication nuance, whether written or verbal, and just some experience and wisdom that comes with, the gray temples that cannot be AI'd. And there will be part of my industry that falls away because of the advent of technological advancement, but there will never, and I'm willing to go on record with that word, be a situation where the components of what I do as an executive recruiter and a human being can be replaced completely by AI. And I'm glad for that. I enjoy the compliments and the benefits that come with what tech can do. But I'm not looking to replace what I do with a lot of tech. I still take a lot of joy in my craft and like the old school way of writing my messages and personalizing things and doing it one at a time. But I couldn't do that if I was in a high volume business, Amy. It wouldn't work.
Yeah. And I'll just say this, I don't know how we're down on AI so much, but I guess it's everywhere. The issue with AI is that it will replace a lot of functions in some ways, but the critical thing is that the user has to know exactly what they want. And I don't know about, well, I'm sure you say this, like there's a lot of the work we do is getting to the starting line, right? And getting to the starting line then allows you to go forward. Uh, that's not how AI works. AI works when you know what you want, and then you work towards perfecting what you're asking it, so you can perfect the outcome. So who knows how long that lasts? But back to why.
Yeah. Back to
Before
why.
we move on,
Yeah.
Amy, I just want to clarify for you and for the audience about John and I and what we do together. So obviously, I do recruiting. John talks about employee and fit to role and company culture and acceleration. So we own a business together where we utilize a assessment tool called OAD, Organization Analysis and Design. It's an international company. Our point of contact, one of the founders, is in Montreal, Canada. It's used globally. It's been around for decades, and it's a wonderful scientifically backed assessment tool that we opted to go into business together so that we could own the distribution rights for North Carolina here in the US, as well as any referrals that would come our way in other places. And it fits in really nicely because you can utilize an assessment tool to try to figure out if the right person's in the right seat and are they engaged in the role and do they fit the company culture. You can also utilize it on the front end in recruiting to see if the individual, based on their personality results on the assessment, could be a good fit for the role or the company. So it naturally dovetailed with what we did anyway. And when the network connected us back during COVID, we met in the height of the shutdown when we were both trapped at home, couldn't go outside, and we're networking and trying to meet new people. And we just 30 minutes together, and we were like, oh, I want to keep talking to this guy. And then 2 years later, we started a company. And so I will bring opportunities to the table through my natural business communication with companies that are hiring that turns into business opportunities for me and John. He will, through his networking, bring opportunities to the table that's a good fit for our business together, but also separately. So there's combined benefit where we each feed opportunities into the business we do together. But there's also opportunities where we may refer business to one another separately that feeds the other practices that we run. So it's I just want to make sure that people understood that there's a lot of pollination that happens there, and that's why our why. That's probably why
Why
we're
are our
doing
whys
what we do.
aligned?
Is our why is aligned for a long time.
I hear you, and thank you for sharing. The AI, the tools, the wisdom, they serve a purpose, but you're serving with purpose, and there's a big difference. And I just wondered what it is that you could share from that distinction.
Well, we talked about our whys. When I got into consulting, I have an identical twin brother who's been a consultant for many years, similar but different. He turned me on to a book called The Go Giver, and I reference this online a lot. And it just resonated with me because I think the quintessential servant leader. Like, I understand my role is to, when I ran a team, was to get the most out of the team and give the credit to where the credit was due, which is the team effort. I remember years ago, as I became a manager, I'd be interviewed for different jobs, and I get this feedback from the recruiter who sent me. They're like, they're really frustrated with you because all you did was talk about we and not I. I'm like, I, that's okay. That's me, right? If you read my about section on my website, it starts out, I'd much rather talk about you than me, but I guess you're here for a reason, so I better write something. But and so I am a we person. I give, I mean, give to get maybe, but I give first and figure out the rest later. So that's my purpose. That's how I interact in the world, and it serves me well. Maybe it's not for everyone.
And Will, before I ask you the same question, I just want to build on that with John, and the same will apply to you in terms of what's your definition of success, John?
Oh, well, at this stage of my career, there was a time in my career, I'm guilty of it, which was some senior leader would leave and I would have an eye on it. And if I didn't get that office that was 8% bigger than mine, it was a major slight and I wasn't going to stand for it. I fell into that trap. Many people are in that trap. I've subsequently had to have that surgically removed from me after all the years of indoctrination. So at my point in my career, just serving people and making a living doing it is my definition of success.
Brilliant. And across to you, Will.
Yes. Purpose and success.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I don't believe that anybody uh, um, goes to college and says, or university and says, I want to be a salesperson. When there are actually here in the U.S. and probably in the U.K. as well, there's actually now classes and degrees in sales, and that was not a thing when I was in school, nor was it when John was in school. But I didn't know that I was going to end up in sales. That kind of happened accidentally. I didn't know I was going to end up in recruiting. That happened accidentally. Life presents windows, right? And you look at opportunities and you decide, if am I going to jump through that window without knowing how far down the ground is? And you don't always. Sometimes you regret that you didn't. So I fell into sales in 1998. I fell into recruiting in 2004. And I just kept my head up and my eyes open, and purpose revealed itself to me. I remember early in my staffing industry career, my job was to go out and find jobs, contact companies. Hey, yes, we're hiring. Great. Well, we've got the solution for you. Let me connect you with my recruiting team and we'll fill that job. Right. That's what I was there to do. But there's another side of the equation, which is the human beings that you encounter out there who are like, hey, I need a job. Or, hey, my spouse just got laid off. And that's not how the business works. We don't get paid by the human. We get paid by the company. It says, go find a human. They want us to find that human, not that one. And it tore me up a little bit that there was this gap where there were people that was just like, hey, you know what? I appreciate that, but we can't help you, which is not unprofessional, but it's still not good to hear when you're the one that's looking or you want to refer a friend. So I remember saying to my old bosses, I said, listen, this happens to me a lot, and I know we can't help these people, but I'm going to connect with them and just read a resume, give them a little bit of advice, and try to connect them one step further beyond me so that they, maybe get some help. And they were like, that's going to take a lot of time. Are you sure that's a good use of your time? And I said, yeah, I think so. They were not wrong. But what I started doing really early was building a network. Before I even knew that I was building a network, I was building a network because I was the only person that they encountered in staffing that was like, hey, let me help. Instead of, that's not what we do, it was, what can I do? And so ultimately, my purpose has ended up being just impacting lives and making a difference. Sometimes I get paid for it, right? Which is great, right? Like that's a win. Sometimes I don't get any cash for it. But my wife will tell you that I do it because it feeds my soul. It's like the story I told you earlier about the guy. It's like, you changed my life in 2013. He's a nice person. I had forgotten that exchange. And it's not because he isn't great. It's just, I can't keep all that in the brain. But wow. I mean, there's a lot of people who I've done that for over the years, and that's special to me. And now I have a network that is so expansive that I don't prospect for new business. Everything is inbound. I talk to other recruiters and other agencies who are struggling right now in this market, much more so than our firm. And they're like, the hardest thing is drumming up business. And I said, I don't have to. And I'm not being egotistical about it. I just have stuck to my philosophy of take the call, offer help, pass it along, karma matters, and it's paid off.
Will, let me add someone who's been on the other side of the recruiting firm. You get puffed up and you get backslapped, you get prepared for the meetings, and then if the client doesn't react positively, so many percent of recruiters just stop the conversation, right? They don't respond. And you realize that you were a product and nothing more. And I think you're the rare instance. And I think it's those people who optimize their time. Why would I talk to this candidate when the client isn't? I have to go find another candidate. They're the ones who are suffering now because they played the transaction game. They played the time optimization game, and it may have worked in the moment, but it certainly doesn't work long term. Amy, thanks for having us on. We're both podcasters, so you gotta rein us in.
That's
But
fine. I mean, I'm hearing the difference between the transaction and the transformation is what's important to you. You're focusing on the latter in terms of the groundwork, the longevity. Will, for you, what's your definition of success?
Thank you, Amy. John, I appreciate the interjection and the framing. Couldn't agree with you more. Success. I already have it. Like, I love what I do. Every single day I get joy. There are frustrating things about my job. My product is people, and they can be hard to read, and they can do one thing and or say one thing and do another. It's an unpredictable business. I also don't have a recurring revenue stream, right? I get paid when I win. When I don't win, I don't get paid, right? And although I love what I do and I do plenty of work that's unpaid, I do have bills. Those keep coming. They're recurring. So, but success is the fact that I don't feel like I have a job because I love every aspect of what I do, even the hard stuff. I work with my wife. I made two amazing decisions in my life. One was asking her to marry me, and the other was asking her to run this business with me. And to be able to take the marriage and the parenting and the business and segment and silo those things and keep them separate and not have one situation bleed over to another and keep the relationship going. It's not easy, but I trust her implicitly, and she is a yin to my yang, and we are very successful together. And then I have my marriage with John. So that'll be the third best thing that ever happened. Yeah, I'm very successful, even if I don't help somebody find a job today, because my success is measured in joy with what I do. And I'm very, very fortunate that I found that and that I actually make money doing something that makes me very happy.
And it's interesting you just mentioned about how your success is measured in joy, because I talk about the success markers and milestones that you build into your business that are founded in what really matters. And they're not the traditional metrics that success is usually seen from a societal perspective. They're very much based on the relationships, the emotional well-being, the legacy and impact, and the personal growth or the relationships that you have with the other people. So you've spoke throughout that your markers, your milestones are measured in those, as well as financial success. Yes, you have to pay the bills, but it's not the primary get up and go for you. And it was something that John said right at the start about the attention and the intentionality and the getting the people thing right. What I feel from both of you is that you have got people's attention and you're intentional with what you're doing.
Yep.
You're right.
I would agree with that. And we both come from different backgrounds. I've only ever worked for small business. Like the biggest company I worked for had 15 employees. And now I work with a company that has 2. John, like he mentioned indoctrination, he came from corporate, big, I mean, he'd see 15 different people just walk into the bathroom. So, it was burned into him, move up, move that title, get that bigger office, and so he had to unwind all that. We had very different paths to get to where we are, but we, interestingly enough, ended up in the same place.
Yeah. And one has had a bit more suffering than the other, that's for sure. So
Yeah, and I don't love that I chose that word suffering, because it's one of my experience is one of privilege with good work and bad bosses, let's say, and maybe the suffering was a little too much. But my point was, I've seen it done poorly, and much more than I've seen it done well. And so I take my markers from helping the people who are in environments where it's done poorly. So thank you for the chance to clean up that word.
yeah, no, absolutely. And there are many people who are led into extreme burnout and in a very unhealthy respect they are working. And so when I reflect that word in your circumstance, you've corrected me, but I know for sure that there are many people out there who are pursuing a very unfulfilled way of working that is bringing them a lot of distress. So it is with that in mind that I focus on that particular word. In terms of wrapping up the conversation, before we do that, what's the best way of people reaching out and saying, I love the way that John and Will work, both together and separately? I know we're going to put it in the show notes, but just signpost people to the best places, please.
We are alive and present on LinkedIn. Very easy to find us. We'll give you our email and that kind of stuff. But yeah, and I got a website. He's got a website. We're easy to find, and we'd love to talk to anybody who has made it this far, who isn't married to us or you, and wants to talk about how we might be of service.
Yeah, LinkedIn. That is the number one tool on the planet for recruiters. I live in there every day. I message in there every day. I'm starting to climb towards the limit of connections that I can have. But I love connecting with people, and anyone can reach out and say hello. If they've heard us on the podcast, or they've got some questions, or they want to connect with John and I separately or together, LinkedIn is, I don't get commission from them for saying the word over and over again, but that's the best way.
I'd just like to say a thank you to Shelley Starks, who brought us all together.
Shelley's the
And
best.
there we go, because the conversation has happened through the very essence of what you've been speaking about today.
Oh, and she's a networker, a pro. She's such a giver. She's an excellent example of what we've been talking about here.
Excellent example.
And thank you, Amy. Thank you for being willing to mix it up and interview 2 at the same time. Hopefully it's brought a little bit of different flavor to your podcast.
Absolutely. Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on
Thank you,
Focus on
Amy.
Why.
Thank you, Will.
All the best to everyone.
Well, what I'd like to just share is the wonderful positive energy that you've brought to this conversation, and through your unique relationship, just how unified you are. That connection is really strong. It really does shine, which is lovely. There has been joy in this conversation in terms of what you've brought to the space. I know it's only been a short one, but opportunity and creativity and joy and connection have really shone through for me. So thank you for that. Do you have some final words for the audience each, please? John first.
Play the long game. Do what Will did, which is help when help is needed, and not transactionally, because it will come back, but it will come back in some way.
I think John summed it up well for both of us. If you focus on what's right in the moment for the person that you're interacting with, and you just try to help. You don't have to do a huge lift. Just let them know that you care, and how can I help you? Well, there's 2 ears, 1 mouth, right? You listen more than you talk. That's old school sales stuff. But one of the things I learned in the networking early on was listen to the other person and let them talk first before I get into who I am, what I do, and play that long game, and try to build connection and rapport, and do the right thing, and more cliches if you like. I got them.
I want to add a quote, if I may. In networking, focus more on being interested than being interesting. And I learned that late, and it really helped me.
This episode's over, but let's keep the conversation going. How has this episode impacted you? Share your insights, takeaways, and reflections with actions on social media, or leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Your feedback creates powerful ripple effects, helping others to discover its value. Want to dive deeper into purpose? Check the show notes for links on how to work with me, where to buy my new book, Focus on Why, Create a Purposeful Way of Life, available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook, and where to sign up for Friday Focus, my weekly newsletter. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why.